Thank you. Hello, readers and friends. Today is Wednesday, July 6, 2022. Thanks for being here. People interest me. One of my mentors said years ago that every person has a story, and I agree. I'm curious about how they've made certain decisions about their lives, the choices that help define them, like food preferences, how they maneuver in the world with their narratives, their recollections of family routines and customs. And while people interest me, I've always had difficulty being with people, especially now since COVID. With looser restrictions over the past few months, I just don't think we have a clear sense of what the outcomes might be in the future. I refer mainly to the mask mandates. I carry several in my bag. I have one or two in my car. I'm careful at the stores I go to. I wear a mask when I go to the grocery store, when I go into a restaurant. It doesn't matter to me that most customers and staff are not wearing one. I just feel safer when I'm masked. So please, let me digress for just a second. At one time, disposable diapers were chucked nilly-willy here and there, over and yonder, tossed from car windows, discarding them where the child's diaper had actually been changed. About a month before my surgery, we were in the city at the Palace of Fine Arts. Leisurely, I circled around the path because it had been years since I'd last been there. The peaceful area is maintained on a regular basis. However, it appeared that between the last cleanup and when I was walking, people had tossed aside not only disposable diapers, but also now the inescapable light blue or black masks. Several times I discovered them laying on the ground near each other. I have a hunch that disposable masks will soon outnumber disposable diapers in our lives, littering everywhere. Okay, thank you. Done with digression. Since March 2020, I have not gone brick and mortar retail shopping. I have been shopping online, where I'm more conscious of my choices. I read reviews and I decide whether I really want this item. I don't miss it much. This has helped me realize how often I went shopping because I was dissatisfied with some aspect of my life and felt that retail therapy might help raise my emotional state. And all of us know that's just a false fantasy. Last weekend, AC and I debated from Friday night through Saturday afternoon about attending a gathering to celebrate several friends' birthday that night. I think the real reason why I didn't want to go was remembering the last time I went to see a group of friends. AC got some sort of stomach bug and I ended up having gallbladder surgery. Now that's the queen of all stomach bugs. And of course, there is no correlation to any of these threads. Still, I was leery and we ended up not going. So long story short, I have a new friend. I like people who have a passion, and his passion is photography. He takes the most spectacular photos of the fog floating over Bixby Bridge, or the sun rising up over the wetlands between here and Moss Landing. His quirky, odd sense of humor is different than the self-deprecating humor that a lot of my friends appear to have. Todd's borders on mockery at the cost of someone else, not himself. So fine, I can't change his brand of humor. I can only say things like, I didn't get that, please explain. Because most of the time I really don't get a sense of humor because my mind just doesn't take me there. He is also not an adventurous eater. Unlike many of my friends, we've never had a discussion about food. I love talking about food, about new recipes, trying out a new dish, a new restaurant that I'd never been to before. I love to cook. I love copying recipes from the internet and saving them. I have this huge three-ring binder that really needs to be sorted. I love to eat good food, and I'm curious about different tastes, ways of cooking, herbs, spices, different combinations of food. And I have some friends whose food tastes are different than mine. One of my very good friends, Julia, loves her meat and potatoes. When we go to lunch, we make sure hamburgers are on the menu. We don't do Japanese, Mexican, or Thai food. My friend Lillian is borderline vegan, but she doesn't much like vegetables. She lives on protein drinks that are full of vitamins and other healthy stuff. Once we went to a Mexican restaurant because who doesn't love Mexican food? I pretty much cleaned up my plate and noticed that she had just moved for food around, taking only a few bites. After lunch, she said she didn't like Mexican food. Surprised, I asked her why she didn't say anything when I suggested that restaurant. She just shrugged. Now I ask her where she wants to go. I go to vegetarian restaurants with my vegetarian friends. With other friends, we go to Chinese, Mexican, Mediterranean, Italian, Japanese. I am a food voyeur in that I watch what people eat. I don't know what I learned by doing this. I'm just curious. Todd came over for dinner. He loved my maple baked beans. He toyed with the oven fried chicken. He didn't have any salad. He ate a couple of buttermilk biscuits, and he loved my lemon panna cotta dessert. A few months ago, we had people over for lunch. I made a couple of salads and AC barbecued sausages. There were about 8 of us, reaching over each other, talking, laughing, passing bowls of food, refilling glasses with water or sodas. I noticed Todd quietly at the end of the table, meticulously taking out thinly sliced red onions and Kalamata olives that I had put in the pasta and shrimp dish. A couple of weeks ago, 4 of us went to lunch. Todd had recently returned from a car trip through Oregon just because he wanted to. Lovely. I really appreciate people who want to travel just because. Our meals came and we were all quiet, tasting our food, asking for ketchup, salt, hot sauce. Todd stopped telling me his story as he picked out red onions and spent 5 minutes scraping off the mayo from his BLT. I wondered why he didn't ask him to hold the mayo, like Jack Nicholson's diner scene in 5 Easy Pieces. Across the table, AC was deep in conversation with our good friend Theo. Their topic was the decision that was made that Friday, June 24th. So they were not paying attention to Todd's and my conversation. Finally, he had picked out all of the onion, had scraped off all the mayo, and he began to retell his story, remember exactly where he'd gotten sidetracked. Now, there's a skill. He was telling me in detail an experience he had had on his trip. An unexpected storm followed him for most of the day. The rain had stopped, and then he noticed the front tires of his car started feeling sort of squishy. He was also feeling hungry and cold and wanted to find a place to stop for the night. Pulling over to look at a map, he blushed. Yeah, I know. I could have used the GPS in the car. I guess I just feel a little bit more secure with a map. Sumter, Oregon was just 8 miles up the back road he was driving on. He arrived in the small town, population 245, to take care of several needs. 1, he needed a mechanic to look at his tires. 2 and 3, he needed to eat and find a place for the night. It was around 6 p.m. when he drove down the main street, which was not very long. Stopping the car, he walked out, looked around. There was a cafe, a bank, a grocery store, all closed. Then a big pickup truck drove up. Todd felt extremely confident that he'd get some help. Instead, the driver didn't even notice him and continued on his way down the street. Todd was beside himself. He thought about calling AAA for roadside service, and a few minutes passed, and a man on a 10-speed bike stopped. And then Todd started describing the only person he met in Sumter. Evidently, this person in Sumter, Oregon, was single-handedly celebrating Pride Month. He was on a 10-speed bike with lavender streamers and one of those little utility flags that a utility company might put in someone's yard indicating a gas line. Well, Todd rolled his eyes and pointed at me. That little flag of his was on his handlebars, and it was all the colors of the rainbow. Duh. I felt I knew where this was going. I tried to be open, and I worked hard to listen. He continued, his BLT forgotten, his fries cold. And, he said with a puckered mouth, this guy was dressed in a purple t-shirt, and he had on purple biking shorts, and Todd had quite a difficult time describing the rest of this person's attire. I gathered Todd felt it was totally wrong for this person to dress this way. He was wearing a pink tutu. Todd almost screamed this. The restaurant was buzzing with hungry customers. Babies wailed and couldn't be quelled by their mothers. Waitstaff patiently took orders and answered questions. I laughed and clapped my hands. That's so cool. It's Pride Month. My friend Todd peered over his glasses at me. By this time, Theo and AC had stopped their conversation. Theo and I exchanged, "Are you okay?" glances. He nodded. I nodded and he smiled, and he and AC returned to their consideration of world events. Theo is a good friend of mine, and he makes no bones about being a gay man, and he heard me say, "It's Pride Month." Todd continued to peer at me. It was just too much. I mean, I'm all for gay rights, but do you have to shove it in my face like that? I felt the surge of anger rush through me. Then right behind that anger was a profound disappointment that I had not been attuned to Todd's homophobia before this. As grown up as I could, without tearing into him, I gave him my reality. I said quietly, my head bent near his face, his glasses still propped halfway down his nose. And he was the only person who stopped to give you any sort of help that day. Todd pushed his glasses back up and sort of fanned his hands, indignant. "But you don't understand. It was so over the top. I mean, I'm as open as the next person, but don't flaunt it like that." I fell back in my chair, stunned. It had been a long time since anyone had said anything like this to me. And sadly, I realized he doesn't know me very well. He doesn't know decisions I've made in my life that have led me here. Finally, I had to say, still in my grown-up voice, as non-judgmentally as I could, "I'm not going to continue this discussion with you. You may not talk to me like this about anyone." I felt a little part of my heart close to Todd. And yes, my mentor was absolutely right. Everyone does have a story. I have a choice about whether or not I want to listen. Thanks for joining me today. If any of you have had similar experiences with friends and letting them be themselves while still holding a line on what's important to you, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment here, or if you prefer, message me on Instagram or Facebook. And don't forget, YouTube counts everything that happens here. If you appreciate these chats, won't you give this video a thumbs up? And clicking that red subscribe button really helps as well. And the best way to support me continuing our visits and writing is to actually buy my books. The address on my Amazon page is in the description. All the Walkerville books are available there in both Kindle and print editions. So please tell your friends, write a review, post something on your social media. You'll find the direct link for next Wednesday's live chat down in the description as well. Hope to see you then. And again, thank you so much for joining me today.